we will be having like a form of a panel discussion rather than presentation. I know people got lots of presentations for today and yesterday. So we thought that to make it like a form of a discussion, so everyone would be involved, especially that it was planned to be a small group of people. So the title for today is what we call Technology, Analytics, and Artificial Intelligence in the Accounting and Audit Profession. And it's more of an open floor for discussions and ideas and trying to share practices as well. So I'm having the privilege today to have with me Professor Nicholas Vesarelli from Rutgers University Business School. I've got myself, I'm Amir Michael. I'm a professor of accounting at Durham University and the director of what we call the DRAAN, the Durham Rutgers Accounting Analytics Network, which we'll speak about in a moment. We've got Hila Atasoy. She's about to join us. It's just some delay with her. She's again assistant professor in accounting at Rutgers, and you join her to Rutgers team. And I've got Wenru Wang, a graduate assistant of accounting and a PhD student in Rutgers University. So we thought having this session today with multiple people from different experiences and different levels in their career. So I'd like every one of the panelists to like give us a bit of a background about himself or herself before we start. So Nicholas, you'd like to make a start about yourself, like an introduction? Can you unmute yourself, Nicholas?
Sorry about that.
That's right.
I got muted. My name is Miklos Vasveli. I am the director of the continuous auditing laboratory at Rutgers University. Rutgers is a state university of New Jersey. And we have a reasonably large group, around 40 or 50 people working on audit analytics type of issues. And we have been ranked by Brigham Young University as a world leader for about 30 years in this area of accounting information systems.
Thank you, Nicholas. And I'll go directly to Wenru.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Wenru Wang. I'm currently a PhD candidate and at Rutgers, and I work with Professor Miklos with several projects, and we are utilizing the idea of continuous audit and monitoring to help the government to fix issues, to help their efficiencies. And I'm really looking forward to talk to you more about our projects and our progresses.
Thank you, Wenru. And just a matter of housekeeping to make sure everyone aware that we're recording this session, and we hope that we can use it afterwards for anyone who'd like to listen or to share it with the students as well. So after these introductions, I'd like to speak about a little bit about what we call the DRAAN, the Durham Rutgers Accounting Analytics Network. The idea came that we were having relationship between Durham University in the United Kingdom and Rutgers University Business School in the US through the Rutgers CAR Lab. So the CAR Lab, as Nicholas mentioned, is the top leader or the world leader for this type of accounting research in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and of course, accounting information systems. So one of the things that we are working on in Durham is we are very interested in this area, but we have expertise in public sector as well, research. So we thought that we can have some kind of engagement. So last summer, we built this Rutgers Analytics Network, which is more of having mirroring what's happening in the US, of course, on a smaller scale, because in the US, Michael's team is having huge experience in this area. We're working nicely with them, and we joined with some people. I can see hands in front of me as well, from Sussex, who works with us on some projects in this center. The DRAAN idea as well is to work on some joint research. So myself or other my colleagues in the DRAAN works with other colleagues in Rutgers on joint projects. That the only difference is, like I call it always when I'm speaking to Nicholas, so okay, it's the British wing of the CAR Lab. It's trying to work on using British data on similar project was happening to CAR Lab. So that's the idea of it. We do lots of research in analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, XBRL, RPA, which is the same areas that Rutgers University Car Lab is having expertise in. And the other thing as well, we record our sessions. So again, the same way we're trying to contribute to the Rutgers University Business School Car Lab digital library by having another digital library by recording all our sessions and put them on a YouTube channel for free for any researchers or any PhD students. It's the same concept which Michaelis is accommodating in the Car Lab. So we're trying to make sure we are very tight to all the concepts, principles being used in Rutgers, and that's helped us to work nicely together without any changes or any differences. So the idea of today's session as well is to start with some kind of discussion. But before our discussion, I see we have joined now with Hilal. So I'd like to ask Hilal if she's all right to introduce herself very briefly, and then we'll kick off with the discussion. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amir. And sorry, my apologies. I had this meeting on my calendar 11:30 before the time change. So sorry, I was late. I haven't realized now it's 10:30 instead of 11:30 with the time change. Thank you, everyone. My name is Hilal Tasoy. I'm an assistant professor at Rutgers University. My research is in general on healthcare analytics and healthcare audits, and how technology impacts cost and quality of care in the hospital and healthcare settings.
Thank you very much, Hilal. So we'll start kicking off with the discussion today. So I've got in front of you some questions we'd like to discuss today. Of course, depending on the time, how much we can go through them, but it's giving a framework of today's discussion. So I'd like to start with a broad question, and maybe I'll start with Michaelis to start giving us a background for that, and then the impact of technology and AI on the audit process and quality. So I'd like to hear your thoughts here, Michaelis, around you work in this field for many, many years. So what do you think the impact of technology and AI on the audit process and quality?
I just had to cut my PhD class in auditing, by the way, which any of you are welcome to attend by an hour, because this was the time of this presentation. And there, Lou Zhang and my colleague Shanta Thomas were presenting a paper based on our Radar project. Radar project was a project that concluded last year. It stands for Rutgers AICPA Data Analytics Research Initiative, and was funded by the 8 larger CPA firms, the AICPA and Canadian CPA Canada. And there we did basically 2 projects, one full population testing, the other one process mining. And we did a survey of what are the big 8 doing in analytics. And the results were underwhelming. Basically, our impression was that the firms, particularly the big 4, have extensive technological competencies in things like robotic process automation, a little bit of AI, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look carefully, at least what they told us, they are not really using it very much. There is some ratio analysis. They have developed some tools that they could use. Deloitte have been using regression for decades. But if you look carefully, there is basically spreadsheets that they use, and they have pretty good work paper management under other names as the tools that they use. Things like usage of Watson by KPMG for bank loan assessment, default assessment, etc., are one-off type of projects. They invest a lot of money on it, but I don't think they have kind of joined mainstream. So I think it's reasonable to say that the audit profession is a serious laggard in the adoption of technology and the use of technology. And I want to make another qualifier here that maybe is a more extreme qualifier, is that the reporting model is an obsolete reporting model. And because the reporting model is obsolete model, the assurance function is very limited on the benefit it provides. Now, if you start looking at internal audit, then the regulations that control external audit are released, and you find some companies with really advanced attempts of technological use. We have been working with AB InBev, a beer company in, I don't know, 80 countries or whatever, in the compliance group and the internal audit group, mainly the compliance group. And it's very impressive, the databases they have, the machine learning attempts that they are doing, and etc. However, on the firms, is my impression that on the consulting side, they have competencies that are used in basically consulting engagement. The firms are about, the large ones, about 70% consulting and 30% audit and tax. And in the 30% of audit and tax, the usage of what I would call state-of-the-art technology is very limited.
Oh, that's great. And I'll come back to one point you mentioned, Nicholas, around the quality of reporting and how it's not helping auditors to use appropriate technology. And we spoke a lot about that, about the taxonomy. So can you shed a light on another project you worked on a long time ago, which is the Galileo project, which is about reporting?
Okay, Amir, it's good that you mentioned Galileo. Actually, we just published, or is coming out, a paper called the Reporting 4.0. And it's with Michael Alice and a couple of other authors. And what we were trying to do there is look at the Galileo project and say, what would be Galileo project today? Galileo project was developed after the crisis 2003, and in a thing the ICPA called the Enhanced Business Reporting Model, whereby there were 4 models developed, and Galileo was the real forward-looking one. And at that time, we argued for a database set of reporting with the OLAP layer, because you could cut, go down into product, go down into region, go down into et cetera, and some layers of preset disclosure and the ability to create reports on any way you wanted. That was what Galileo was. In Reporting 4.0, we took much more the philosophy of Industry 4.0. And in that philosophy, we're talking about a web layer, and basically reporting being an app that you could configure any way you wanted. And of course, that causes very interesting questions about privacy of data, and certainly companies will not be very excited about the level of analytical scrutiny that they could suffer. But that's what we argue in Reporting 4.0. And in effect, actually starting to happen. Certainly the non-financial reporting at ESG level that is emerging in Europe is really a substantial expansion on reporting. What I find deficient still is reporting is very backward-looking, very constrained. The model that we have developed in the past based on Luca Pacioli's Summa Mathematica in the late 1400s, 1493, if I recall correctly, is really worries about physical assets, meaning what is in your inventory, what is in your supply chain, what the physical assets you have, the buildings and etc. How do you divide profit and debt you have? But modern business is not like that. There was a conference about 2 months ago at University of Waterloo talking about the value of data. and basically it's saying the data is a new oil, and companies like Google, Facebook, etc., car companies, etc., have this plentiful of data about clients, about behavior that they can use. And those things are not valued in their assets. And we have to develop models that take some of that into consideration. And the moment you do that, you finish up with the problem of you have in the reporting is the reporting being disclosed accurately? And how much can the discloser manipulate data to look better or to improve their bonuses or whatever, or to sell the company better, etc. And so those are very, very serious issues that needs to be raised. I always talk about Ball and Brown research in the 60s that had very high I-squares. So the relationship between the value of the company and the data in accounting reports of the company, the R-squares were in the 60% or etc., the adjusted R-squares. And now papers that come to Rutgers in market studies, the R-squares are 5%, 4%. If you read Baruch Lev's book on the end of accounting, he basically in the beginning shows that the effect is 5%. So obviously there are other things that explain market valuations, and they are not the financial statements. And the purpose of financial statement is to tell the value of the company in many dimensions, and we need to kind of change that reporting model into a way that explains better. And typically the FASB and international standards fiddle with little details and don't deal with the real issue, which is the aggregate valuation and the ability of the different stakeholders to predict the value of the firm and to understand better what the firm is doing for their own purposes, regulation purpose, investment purpose, local ecology purposes, etc., etc. So I know I was kind of long on this story, but reporting and assurance have to go hand with hand, and we need to be able to provide modern capabilities of measurement and assurance.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And I think that the takeaway from here is that we cannot treat auditing on its own. We need to have an infrastructure reporting to help to accommodate better technology to improve the quality of the audit process in all cases. Maybe I'll turn to Hilal now and ask her something a bit different around the implementation of analytics, AI, and machine learning in government and public sector spending. I mean, I know, Hilal, you're having lots of experience with hospitality, sector. So what's your experience with that about implementing AI and analytics and machine learning in hospitals as example of public sector or government institution?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Amir. Yeah, so it's a very big issue in the healthcare system as well, because also, at least in the United States, hospitals have to implement a certain level of electronic health records and certain level of technology as a part of a governmental policy. And that led to many changes in the industry in terms of cost of care, quality of care, as well as reporting. So, for example, we find that these types of analytics and technological tools change initially the way that physicians and hospitals capture the initial patient data. And this allows, in general, these types of technologies allow capturing a lot more detailed information. And then hospitals reporting and actually financials are very heavily dependent on this type of patient data. And we find that in certain cases, hospitals can manipulate this type of extra information. They can easily add or automatically add into templates into their records to report more complex patients that increase reimbursements with the goal of increasing reimbursements received from the insurers. So in order to gain financial benefits. And there's a big public policy actually to control for that type of manipulation as well, recovery audit program. So the hospitals are being audited on a rolling basis to be able to reduce that type of manipulation that hospitals do via technology and analytics and capturing more information into their records. But also this doesn't mean, I think this is always a harmful or a tool that is being manipulated or has harms. But in general, we find that a lot of the technological tools, data analytics, AI in the healthcare setting really helps decision making for physicians, for administration, and we find that it improves patient outcomes because it can also standardize the decision-making process by physicians to lead to better patient outcomes, less errors, so on and so forth. So overall, there's a trade-off, as in many cases, I think in these types of analytics, AI tools, and technology in the healthcare as well. It can be beneficial, it can reduce costs, it can improve quality, but on the other hand, it can be manipulated and used for fraudulent cases as well.
Thank you, Hilal. What you're saying here is interesting about using technology in capturing data, which is similar situation in the UK. I mean, you worked recently jointly with me on a project with the NHS, and you can see the amount of data there. So they use technology to capture data. But do you think that we are in a stage that we can say that we are leveraging on this data in order to help in decision making by looking at different insights or getting more value added of this data, or we're still behind on this area?
Yeah, so I think again, it's two-faced coin. I think like the additional patient level data, the additional data that is being captured every day can be used in lots of different ways. And it really enables in the healthcare setting as well, machine learning tools, AI tools to come up with better decision-making for physicians. So most of the time, so these types of tools can generate opinions and right decisions that the experts themselves did not figure out different types of patterns from the data. So this additional data that has been captured in the electronic health records or via technology has several beneficial uses. But on the other hand, in terms of reporting and in terms of the financial cycle, it has been also found that hospitals can manipulate this type of additional data for financial gains. But I think in general, I believe that it is a good thing to have more data and to capture additional data about the patients, about different type of populations, different types of heterogeneous groups, so that we can go beyond the average, for example, trial. That's usually is the gold standard for evidence in medicine, because now combining all data from different sources via machine learning and AI has been actually found to provide lots of more insights for different types of populations and different types of heterogeneous groups.
Yeah, I think just to put that in context with in contrast with the UK, I think the issue with the UK, we're having lots of data, and I totally agree with you, Hilal, about the manipulation thing. I mean, in the UK, if we talk about the health sector, which is led by the NHS, is that we are having lots of fraud situations. And that's why in 2017, the government brought in a new institution, which is the Counter Fraud Authority, which is a CFA, to trying to avoid or trying to reduce the amount of fraud. The reason for that, they don't know what the source of fraud really is. All we've got is the outcome of the fraud. They see this is the service having this amount of fraud, but how we can, there are lots of whistleblowing, hotline, enhancement technologies there to allow people to point out any fraud situation without mentioning their identity. But still, we are behind. I know the CFA is having lots of data, and it's obvious that there's a lot of fraud, but they don't know how to capture that. They know how to take it to the next level. So maybe in this situation, especially machine learning can help on this thing. And actually, on the other hand as well, you look at the data, sometimes you think the data is a bit confusing. And that's what we found on most of the time. That's why if you digging into this research area on public sector, especially hospitals, you find lots of confusing results. I think I can see from the screen from me, we're having Hans here who's presenting a paper about a project we work on together. So I don't know whether, do you agree or disagree, Hans, that the data is a bit confusing sometimes?
Yes, I agree. Yes. Yeah, I always say to my students, accounting is 50% numbers and 50% politics. And I'm being generous to the numbers. And it satisfies me in a way that our conference is 50% numbers papers and 50% politics papers. I think that's kind of elegant, that is sort of reflected in a conference, the way accounting works. And I think when we talk about research in AI, we often look at the numbers side, but the politics side is just constant. It's still there and it's still being used. So perhaps when we write our AI papers, we should focus a little bit more on the politics as well, and not just on the numbers.
Yeah, I totally agree, Hans. And I think that's the conclusion we found when looking at the data. We think that they are politically driven sometimes with some of the areas. That's good. So let me move to the next thing. I might ask Wenru here to come on board to talk to her about what's her experience with the Big Four and how they're coping with the new contemporary technology, analytics, and AI tools.
Well, I think first of all Big Four firms, if you go to their website, you will find that they all show the confidence in adopting and utilizing the technologies, the data analytic technologies, including AIs, and also it's very interesting to see that they've all have their like special services using some sort of terminologies like cloud. So it kind of give me an impression that there is a trend that the Big Four firms are trying to lead in this profession, that we are open to adopting the technologies. And also it's very interesting that I think they are very confident to show that they have the capability to apply the technology. And also, I think on KPMG's website, you could find that they listed some concerns that some CEOs of the industries of different businesses, they have about the concerns to adopt the modern technologies, but they also give some kind of explanations or some backup plans to fix those issues, because I think it is very common for every business owners or every practitioners in this profession to have some doubts in the adoption and utilization of this technology, because absolutely it requires a lot of training, and also it will require experience in how to apply it. And also as Professor Miklos and Professor Hilaire was talking about the data quality issue, because I totally agree that with more data, we will have a more comprehensive view about the thing that we are trying to audit. But just as Hilaire was talking about, there are new issues like the hospitals could manipulate the data. So these are the new issues that the auditors or the Big Fours, they need to think of a plan that how to train auditors and help them to fix new issues, because we don't want to on the one hand we improved the efficiency of detecting possible frauds, but also we are dealing with some new issues like the data manipulation that we're talking about. So yeah, I think all in all that the Big Four firms, that they are giving us a very opposite attitude about how to embracing the new technologies, including AI. We are open for it, but I think there are new issues that I think they are aware of it, and also our academia field also are preparing for it. And yeah, I think that's the view that I have.
Yeah, Wenu, maybe if you can, why don't you just mention your usage of technology in the hospitals in Rio de Janeiro? That because that's a good example of external data usage.
Right. So as Professor Miklos was talking about, so we continuously working with the mayor's office of Rio de Janeiro, and basically is working with their internal audit team. So we try to help them to create a continuous audit and monitoring system so that they could monitor their medication procurement data on a very timely basis. So in the past, they can also aggregate the data from their hospitals, the state-owned hospitals, and looking at the transactions that they have over almost like 20,000 of medication procurement records, and that's only a small category of their all procurements, because we are only looking at the categories including medicines. So we don't look at other categories including the medical supplies or other procurements. But we are trying to create this system and help them with a more timely monitoring and identification of possible procurement wastes, meaning we are trying to identify if the hospitals are buying at a really high unit price compared to its peers. So in the past, the audit team of Rio de Janeiro, they tried to introduce the exogenous data resource. They are using a federal price catalog and try to compare the prices that the city was buying to the federal price to other states are buying. But in the past, it's really hard to compare from the municipal price catalog to the federal price catalog, because they are now using the same material codes for each medications. So in the past, they can only like looking at the descriptions, the names of the medication, and try to connect one medication to what it really is in the federal price catalog. But we applied the text mining technology, and we used the fact fuzzy matching, and we successfully linked these two data sets together so that we could help them to look up very quickly in our fuzzy matching results, so that they could locate what is the material codes, the federal material codes in our results, and just use this codes to look up for the price in the federal catalog. So this is just a small example, or a small part of our project with Rio de Janeiro, but I think that could help to explain how the deployment of text mining, which is also a data analytic tool to help the government, to help their internal audit teams to improve the efficiency.
Thank you, and Ru. And actually, we're trying to do the same thing with Ru, in the UK as well. I mean, we had this conversation using the same methodology on the drugs in the UK. So not just them, they have the drugs data and they have the IVF treatment data separately. So we're trying to use the same methods in data. And actually, there's a lot of discussion now around this area about procurement, because it's one of the headaches in the NHS about the supply chains and the supplier contracts, which one of the things even the fraud counter authority is looking at, because they seem to guess that there is some fraud in this process from start to end, including the coding and the matching between the names and titles of the drugs and the costings of them. So it's similar to what you're investigating in Rio de Janeiro at the moment. Maybe following on this point, I'd like to ask maybe to anybody, is, do you think that the big four are on the same level of technology competencies, or there are any differences?
I think they are different.
Okay.
I think each one has different capabilities. I seen a presentation about the robotic process automation in tax that E&Y is doing, and that's very impressive what they have been doing. And E&Y also has been doing very interesting work on blockchain and blockchain assurance. I've seen, I think each one have their own, I think depends like the clients that they have or who they hired. It's very heterogeneous, I would say. I keep telling the firms that you're investing on big AI projects using Watson is not where you should go. What you need to do is develop CV for accounting, for auditing, something that is a cognitive computing device that helps the auditor in engagement. And we have a dissertation by Chao Li that at least thought about that problem and basically did a think aloud study of the planning process, the brainstorm process, and designed how a cognitive assistant would be. The idea is that to be an assistant that would collect the experience and the knowledge of 1,000 auditors in 20,000 engagements, and would suggest things, would be skeptical, would do the kind of things auditor is doing. It's a project that would take, in reality, would take some money to develop it, but that would help every engagement, make engagements much better.
That's great. And actually, in the UK, a similar picture, Nicholas. I mean, the only issue, they're always complaining about the clients. So for example, KPMG got their own Clara, which is their AI, PwC having Hello, Deloitte having Kira. And they're always complaining about, yeah, we've got the technology, we've got the competence, we've got the investment, but the clients are not ready yet, or their internal controls are not ready yet to fit with this kind of technology. Sometimes we cannot apply that. So it's a different story. And a little bit in the UK, they try to blame a little bit the clients because they're not ready yet for this technology. And maybe that takes me to the next question, which is about the main challenges and barriers for implementing technology, data and AI in the profession. So maybe from your own point of view, let's start with Hilal. What do you think? What are the main challenges and barriers of implementing AI in general in this accounting and audit profession?
So I guess, should I take it again from the healthcare point of view?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe some of the points are general and apply to different settings as well. But one of the bigger challenges is, especially in the healthcare settings, like a lot of the analytics tools are AI and data analytics tools are developed for changing some of the clinical decision making as well as the administrative decision making. And in the healthcare setting, because I think physicians have a lot of power and they don't want an additional tool to decide for them. And so they are the users, basically the users of the tools are somewhat, I think, skeptical to accept the technology. And I think in several settings, the machine learning and AI tools, one of the big challenges is that, right, the black box approach. So how do we came up with these results? So right, like, can you explain better what the machine learning and the AI did, so that I think the users, this could be auditors, this could be physicians or administrators, accept and understand it better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hilal. Yeah.
Maybe I would like to add to Hilal's point. I think we already talked a little bit about it, but I want to bring this back in. I think the standards are the biggest difficulty. The standards limit what you're allowed to do in an engagement. I'm going to give you two examples of factors that are limits. Okay, the first example is what happens if you use a new analytic method, let's say machine learning or whatever, and you discover that this year you have a fraud or a misjudgment of material amount. This year, no problem. You make an adjustment, the report comes out correct. But how about you didn't discover it last year or the year before because you had less of a technology? So what are you going to do? You're going to have to do a restatement. Or you're going to be quiet because a restatement is not very good, for your economics and for your relationship with the client. So that's one example of problems with the standard. The other example of problem in the standards is with our MEDS that we illustrated with our MEDS project. Typically, the standards say that you find an exception, you have to follow up the exception. What happens if you use full population testing and you come up with 10,000 exceptions? Because let's say, with this example we presented with KPMG to the IASB, you have a population of 1 million, you have a 3% error rate that a three-way match doesn't balance. And many things, as prices have changed, or there is a special deal, the manufacturer didn't have enough inventory, so delivered later. So many of them are trivial, but they are variances. And therefore, you really don't want to do a full population test because you have to call them exceptions, and exceptions have to be followed up, and you go bankrupt following up those exceptions. So that's the second example of where the standards, although don't forbid you do auditing, that they don't forbid you do analytics, basically make it impossible.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And actually, I'll like to share with you here. We've done, this research, Nicholas. We've done a survey on the Big Four in the UK, and we asked auditors and asked audit analysts in the Big Four audit firms, where we asked them what are the main barriers to implement technology or analytics in general in your firm. And I'd like to get guesses, guys. I'd like to get everyone engaged here. What do you think the major barrier from the auditor's point of view of implementing this kind of technology analytics in the statutory audit? Anybody would like to have a go? Even to put something in the chat box, what's the main barrier? Any ideas?
Could be the potential benefit outweigh or underweight the cost, like
Right.
cost benefit.
All right. So you mean here like the value added of it, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Inspections, common data standards, as mentioned. Yeah. Data standards. Perfect. Right. I mean, some of the things here. I mean, I'll share with you. One of the main barriers we looked at about 8 barriers, and we're trying to examine them. And the 2 top barriers were coming. Number 1 was job security. Lots of them don't feel having this kind of job security, which is very interesting. I mean, we asked mainly the sample was having lots of partners into it and lots of managers and senior managers. So some of them said we're having problem with job security. We didn't know if that will take over our jobs, and they were very frank on this occasion. The other thing is about the culture and the culture of training them to do this kind of technology, because they think it's against the culture. Sometimes they call it's not part of the culture. We do the statutory audit, we comply with the standards, and that's what we do. Of course, standards is a big problem. It's a big push because standards are not encouraging them to do so, which I'll come back in a minute, that standards didn't help them. The standards didn't enforce or say, motivate them to use this kind of technology. Because why I'm gonna do that if I do my job without using technology, and I still can comply with standards? So standards is not motivating them to do so. There were other things, very little. One of them is not they don't trust the tools available. Another thing is about data security, of course. So there are many issues here coming up that some of them, that's a big four across the UK, we're having issues of implementing these technologies, which I know that there's a lot of work to go into it in order to encourage audit firms, the audit profession in general, and the big four specifically, to use these technologies. But it's a bit of a way to go. And maybe that's pushing me to the next question around the standards. And I mean, Michael has touched base a little bit on the standards and how standards are not ready yet. And one of the things I'm a bit pleased about seeing as a result of the Kingman report and the Nolan report is to see the FRC new report. I'm sure most of you seen. We call it Restoring Audit and Governance. It's a new report, just came out to restore trust. And that's the first time to talk about two things: trust and expectations. And expectations I'm very pleased to see that coming in the report, that they're saying simply that the stakeholder expectations are not being met by the audit profession. And that's one of the problems. So I think there is a move here, although I'm saying that we haven't seen detailed emphasis or detailed details about any technology tools or any how to apply that. It was very generic statements. So I don't know whether anything we can do. I might go back to Nicholas, because he's having lots of work with the ICPA around this issue. And I think how we can take forward this agenda to convince regulators that they need to make sure that the standards are accommodating technology or analytics or AI or machine learning tools in the audit profession.
It's a very difficult problem, meaning basically I always ask my students ask, why isn't disclosure more complete? I ask, do you like to be graded? Managers don't want to be evaluated. They want to be evaluated in things that they can maneuver. You know, estimates are very good to maneuver. And even accounting standards give a lot of leeway. Now, if you start disclosing the things that exist in ERPs, like labor force, training, predictions of sales, and etc., from one sector to the other, they'll be picked on, say, oh, this is not being done well, that's not being done well. So there is a major resistance at the firm level to being measured properly. And the regulators listen to the regulees substantially. You know, I remember I was very surprised when I asked a SEC member, why didn't they tighten up some rules, and say, oh, our audience doesn't want it. And what is the audience? Are the regulees. It's like us asking the police saying the burglars need to define how I'm being treated. Okay, so that's maybe a strong statement, but the demand for tighter and better procedures happen when problems happen. Look at the problems that happen with auditing in the UK. Now the UK is going ahead of the world in some of the measures that the FRC is basically evolving and proposing, and which is very healthy. And so I think that the only way is trying to push it as much as you can, and expanding the scope of reporting, expanding the scope of assurance, automating it so it's not very expensive.
No, that's great. I might go back to Hilal to see what her views about the standards. What do you think, Hilal? How we can convince regulators to implement or include more analytics and technologies in their standards?
Well, yeah, that's a tough question. I think nobody knows the answer for that exactly. But again, in the healthcare domain, this is a big issue as well, because healthcare domain has a lot of standards. but yet none of them really captures these technological issues. And one big problem I think you also raised earlier, Amir, is the data security and sharing data, healthcare, because healthcare data is confidential. So it is also treated in a very special way. With these types of machine learning and AI tools and different types of technology tools, it always brings up this issue of data security, because most of the time some data needs to be shared from the focal hospital to a different organization and so on and so forth. So the data security standards are very inconsistent in the US across different states, across different locations, which creates a big problem in this type of domain for data sharing, information sharing, which is a very normal and critical need in a lot of cases, but there is not really a common standard of data exchange, which creates I think, big barrier for a lot of these tools as well. But yeah, that's, again, I think, a complicated issue. And I don't think I have the answer to how to convince the regulators to have these in the standards, because also I think the healthcare domain is very complicated and the objectives are vastly different for different stakeholders, patients, insurance companies, hospitals. They all want a different thing. And so the patient data is confidential, and it gets very difficult, I think, to maneuver in that space for with good standards and security, which is very inconsistent right now in the US across different locations.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely making sense, to be fair. And it's always challenging to convince the regulators with something that sometimes you're pushing them a little bit outside their comfort zone. And I think Nicholas was absolutely right. I think the FRC is making it clear that we need to make changes. You can sense that they trying, I don't know whether that intentionally or not, but I think they were trying to make it generic as possible to allow lots of organizations, lots of other stakeholders to contribute, because at the moment this document is out for consultation and they're looking for lots of contribution towards this document or these regulations as part of the new changes to the FRC to be the new accounting, auditing, and governance institution or authority. So again, I agree, it's not that easy. And normally the problem is that the regulators are dealing with multiple stakeholders, which having lots of conflicting interests, and they're trying to please everyone as much as they can. But at the same time, they need to be a bit harsh on some areas, as Nicholas mentioned, that you need to make sure you take the right decision, even that some of the stakeholders will not be very pleased with you on some occasions. Maybe I would like to open the floor now for audience. If you have ideas.
Amir, let me just say one thing before you open the floor. We have a project, we call it the experimentation program. And the project is basically, I always use the Uber example. The rules for taxi are not good rules for Uber. I'm repeating myself. The rules for hotels are not very good for regulating Airbnb. The rules, traditional standards, are not good for modern auditing, the digital auditing. And the experimentation program is the idea that you keep two sets of auditing standards going. One, what we have today, what I call the snail standards, and then you allow experimentation with the advanced standards and don't inspect so tough as they do in the United States. Don't look at the little letters of the law. Let audit firms use the analytics they have or invent analytics, invent AI, etc., to use it without the danger of being attacked and being said that they are carrying improper audits. So we are doing a project in Australia with Macquarie University, and the professor there, Nona Martin-Burney, was for 8 years a standard setter in Australia in the board. I actually made the presentation to the board. And so they endorse the idea of this project, they keep an eye on it, and we work with a firm and an organization and us with analytics to create an alternative way of doing audits or examining. So we are working with a hospital, the Peninsula Hospital there, and with the Teachers Bank, and two CPA firms. And while they are conducting the regular audits, we are doing other auditing things that are more advanced. And we apply machine learning. We have a very nice monitoring dashboard developed. And we are using the MADS technology, which is our full population testing. And hopefully we'll have a paper comparing the two, and maybe hopefully we'll convince the Australian authorities to create the second path in a more efficient way, and that would advance auditing over there. We are very pleased to do that, and I would like to convince the US to do the same, but I'm not very hopeful.
All right, that's great, and I think it's along the lines we all agree with that. And actually, published a published paper recently with Rob Dixon around what we call the dual audit for unregulated disclosures, where we're talking about another type of audit, which is for unregulated disclosures, which are voluntarily implemented or disclosed by firms. So we've done a survey and we suggested a theoretical framework for that, how to take place. And we're moving it to the next stage now in order to see how we can implement that. So we're speaking now to the National Audit Office, which are very, very open to these kind of types of implementation, even on a small public sector organizations or even charities, to see how that's going to be implemented. So one of the ideas we're trying to take that forward is with charities, because having the flexibility to implement these type of dual audit processes, given that the scale they've got, it seems to be reasonable as an experiment. So I totally agree with you. We're trying to do something similar, but on a smaller scale with charities at the moment in the UK. So we picked about 6 charities now across the UK to work with them. Might be opening the floor for anyone of the audience, given that we are a reasonable number, have any ideas about convincing regulators to implement technology, data analysis on AI? Any ideas, guys? You can speak or type in the chat box, up to you really. I know it's a bit tough, it's not that easy, but we're trying to work with the regulators. And I think in the UK, as Nicholas mentioned, FRC and the ASP as well, we're really going forward in this direction. There are other reports by the ICW and recently ICAS, they're trying to put forward this agenda, because the key thing we're trying to work when speaking to regulators in the UK is to emphasize more the value added out of that, not just to the firms or to regulators, but to the community and the world society we are working among, given the collapses we've seen recently.
So,
right,
Amir,
so moving on. Yeah,
Amir,
go on, Hans.
Yeah, no, I mean, you just talked about standards, and I think we're referring to audit standards and stuff like that, but I think data standards are also very important, because I think in particular interoperability between some of these ERP systems is vital, so that we can have some sort of ecosystem for machine learning to develop with a common data set. And I know that Carlab, I mean, wasn't it a few years ago that you worked together with AICPA to develop common data standards for ERP systems and SAP and Microsoft What's It, and that's excellent stuff. And I was kind of hoping almost that you know, this would take flight and people would really adopt that everywhere, and that the Big Four would say, yeah, right, that's it, now we're going to use those standards. And that hasn't seemed to happen. And I was just wondering, does that have any follow-up? Are you still working on that, or do you still work in this area?
The committee of the ICPA, which was under ISAC, the audit data standard, concluded its work with 6 recommended standards.
Yeah.
That's not really being followed, although is mentioned often in the literature. But actually, there is actually commercial entities trying to create standardization heavily. And I think there is there is a European task force working on getting things like SASB and GRI and etc. GRC, all trying to pull together taxonomies that are coherent taxonomies. I'm in the advisory board of one of these efforts, and they are trying to create a super taxonomy that brings together the 77 industry standards of the SASB with the different standards. And it's a very complicated problem, but there is a real business problem, which is using data, unstructured data from one place in another place. And typically the SAPs and Oracles have a standardized data set. So linking them with other things is easier than picking up open data somewhere and etc. But I don't know if you know, there's a company called Engine B. They are kind of a spin-off of KK.
Yeah, we know them. We know them.
Yeah, they are actually, their business model is merging data sets that are inconsistent or they are not very well designed to each other. I think this is going to be the reason why this is going to happen is there is a major business need. And I think progressively there'll be some convergence, but the societal cost of heterogeneity of data is huge.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe moving on to the next question, which is more about another role we all play. Besides we are researchers, we are educators as well. So might be touching on this point around, do you think the qualified accountants and auditors now are equipped with the right skills for implementing technologies, AI in the accounting and audit practice? I might start with Inru from a student point of view. Winru, do you think that your degree or whether undergrad or master's helped you to be equipped with these kind of tools, and how?
Well, I think I would more like talking as a newcomer in the academia field, because I've started teaching an audit analytic course from spring of 2020, and I've talked with my students, and also our syllabus was created to help the students to get equipped with some sort of skills to help them to have some knowledge about data analytic technologies, including text mining, machine learning, and also the application of some softwares, including Tableau, R, and Python, so that when they are ready to the job market, they will have some level of skills or skill sets to help their future companies to be able to visualize the data, to do some level of data processing works, and also to help them to be more competitive. And also, as a CPA myself, I prepared to take the CPA exam, I would say maybe 10 years ago. And when 10 years ago, when I was preparing for it, I don't think that I've read or prepared a lot of works in the data analytics field. And also as a bachelor, and when I was doing my bachelor and master's in 10 years ago, I don't think I've been exposed with such skill sets or the or related educations about that field. But when I was talking to my students nowadays, when they are preparing for the CPA, AI CPA exams, I noticed that in the current curriculums, they are having more and more concentrations on testing the students if they are familiar with some level of the data analytics, and also what are their point of views regarding the application of such technologies. So yeah, I think I'm feeling that from the no matter it's from the CPA practitioner's standpoint or a junior educator's point of view, I can feel that the auditors or the CPAs, the profession is asking more and more for them to be prepared with such skill sets so that not only they will be more competitive to their peers, but also they will be more capable of doing the works that the profession is dealing with every day.
Thank you, Maru. I might ask Hilal, I mean, she's having some experience of teaching. Do you think that our programs now are or our qualifications are helping accountants or the new accountants to be ready to implement technologies, analytics, machine learning, and AI in their practices?
Yes, I agree with Benru that data analytics is becoming more and more important for the curriculum, for the university curriculum. And I think all the schools are trying to incorporate more data analytics in the curriculum. But I honestly think this is not an easy task because, as you know, right, professors don't want to change their classes. Even if they change their classes, it would take few years, and that material needs to be updated again and again. So it is, I think, a quite challenging task to renovate the whole curriculum for technology and data analytics perspective. So in my view, I think the academia is lagging behind on that. Because I think the difference from Renru's experience, I think in Rutgers, we have one of the best curriculums for accounting information systems and data analytics. But when we look at the, I think, educational landscape overall, my view is that most of the new graduates are lagging behind compared to what is being demanded by the industry, because it just takes so much more time for the academia to respond to the needs of the industry. And I think as far as some of the students I see from the prior institutions that I worked at as well, usually the really interested students, they can do really well because they can take extra classes, they can do MIS minor on top of accounting. So they know they like technology and they go in that direction. But if you take like an average, I think, accounting graduate, I don't think overall, across the board, it's not on par with the industry demand level.
Thank you, Helena. I might go to Nicholas and ask him how we can go forward from there. I mean, as you can see, we're having gaps. We're having some issues with equipping new accountants. So what are your views around addressing this issue in future?
Actually, I would like to mix this and then COVID question,
Sure.
because I think the new normal is going to be very different from the old normal. And I think many of the trends that are going to be the new normal were trends that are evolving very slowly. And now with people used to be virtual like we are now, and people used to understand that geography and education are not linked, meaning you don't need to go to the local college, things are going to explode. People are going to go and look for content that is world-class content, that updates their education on a continuous basis, because jobs are going to change in nature. If you see The Economist, this issue, they say, well, the whole idea that jobs are going to disappear, they don't think is true, but the nature of the jobs is going to change dramatically. And so there is a need of new training or new methods of training. So, and we actually trying to do something together with Durham on this domain. We created a menu of 15 analytic advanced technology type of courses, giving the examples, information risk management, cybersecurity, process mining, robotic process automation, etc., etc. When you teach us the second analytics or audit analytics course that we have a sequence of 3 audit analytics courses, actually 4. And we have this thing we call we call the signature course, or the BYOC, build your own course. And build on your own course is, there are like 50 modules, each was equivalent to a lecture. And if you take 5 of them, you get 1 credit. If you take 15, you get 3 credits. And you can mix and match the way you want it. And this is very disruptive. You should see how we struggle to get it approved at Rutgers. It hasn't been fully approved, but we are allowed to experiment with it. We started the signature course this semester, and we have 195 students, because students like the idea. Oh, I choose what I learn. Okay, and the person coordinating, Hussein Issa, is very good. Actually, in the audit analytics class, we started this thing we call SWAM, School with a Million Courses, allowing module selection just in audit analytics. And we tried that for 2 years, and now the signature course is undergraduate, not graduate. And this whole idea of these advanced courses and the SWAM idea are kind of blend with each other. We are picking up these narrow modules out of the classes that when Ru teaches and Kelly teaches, cut it little pieces, and progressively we're having them develop their courses in a modular basis. So, and I think that's what the future is. The future is going to be, you go in a lifetime career in, let's say, in the accounting, quote unquote, area, and you keep upgrading your skills with the new technologies that are needed and collecting it, and the firms paying for your education and requiring it. Because if they don't require, it's very easy to teach the old classes if you're a professor and do the same type of audits you did 20 years ago. So it will have to be a process. Our platform of teaching on this has 3 elements. One is SWAM, School with a Million Courses, a modular delivery of education, unsynchronous, and at the same time testing. Then we have a thing called LENA, which is the learning analyzer. At this moment, pretty primitive, just looking if the student is having trouble or not. In a long range, you want a machine learning, learning diagnostic, AI thing there to really help the student, even with auxiliary aided learning. And the third part, which we are just starting, is this idea of a recommender model. And the people that bought this will also buy that. The idea is a recommender model that understanding what's available for education, what your needs are, and what the profession of the future will be, and what your interests are, recommend which one of these. We now have around 60 modules, which one of these 10,000 modules that are going to be available in the world should be useful for you. Or meaning this modular thing, we are starting it, but I guarantee you that other people will be doing it very soon, because that's a natural thing with this education. And what COVID is doing is accelerating this, because separated person from the university. When Kelly's course, which is the Introduction to Audit Analytics, actually had 2 people in Belgium taking the course. They could afford it, and they took the course. But I had people in Brazil wanting to take the course. They cannot afford Rutgers tuition, and any concession on tuition takes 3 years to do in Rutgers, and they might not want to do it unless they are really pressured into it. So I have been talking to Amir and have been talking to Sufi in China to create an alternative schemata of running courses in parallel or something like that, that we can start doing this new world even when the university is the old world.
Thank you, Nicholas. And actually, this is, I agree with Nicholas. I mean, I've had already, we started working with Rutgers around this project about modules online. You don't need to take all modules to get you the full degree. And actually, we've done a very brief marketing research in the UK. So we have discussions with PwC, NEO, KPMG, and there is a huge demand for this, not to get the full degree, but there are some gaps that like these kind of modules and programs to address. And that's going to be, and the idea again, we're working on everything to be online, even post-COVID, because to make it more affordable and make it more fitting with the time scale and the timeline for people while working. So that's the idea. The other thing finally I'd like to mention here is about the qualifications. So I've been engaged with the ICEW, the Institute of Chartered Accounting in Wales, in redesigning their audit and assurance paper and integrating technology, analytics, and AI into it. And after I've made the project and everyone was happy, yeah, that's fine, it's approved by the board, I've got very nice email, okay, thank you very much, but you caused us a problem. And I don't know what the problem, you put some assessments which we are not able to do, I don't even understand. And actually we took that forward and I told them that's an assessment need to be done through a business solution company, which we've done using what we call Inflow. It's a company, and I guess, of course, it's in Durham because I know them very well, so I recommend it to them. So every student now taking the qualification, they need to do the audit and assurance paper. They need to go through what we call the Inflow audit analytics, audit simulation analytics, which is like an exam, but it's in a real data which been anonymized. So there are lots of changes here. What the story we're trying to say, lots of changes in the way we educate students. I can say my colleague Terry, who joined us, which I teach with him, the data analytics for accounting and auditing in Durham. And I remember when we started this term with COVID, everyone in the department was panicking. How are we going to do this module? Because it's having like 4 software you need to teach. So, but I think we managed it very well. So I think there's going to be the future about online flexibility and some kind of affordability, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time, and make sure it's not taking over time from your work and lots of demand from audit firms. The final thing I'd like to close with final remarks about COVID-19, of course. What do you think the future will hold after COVID-19 in this area? So my start with from back with Vinru. What do you think after COVID-19? How will be any changes to implementing technologies in accounting and auditing or not? Or going to be still same situation?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Professor Michael's earlier statement that there will be some changes, and also even after the pandemic, we maybe will follow what is left from the pandemic. For example, I think one of our Rutgers alumna, Dr. Denise Applebaum, she has a paper in using drones to audit, to help with the audits. And I think that kind of like remote audit concept will be lasting even after the pandemic, because it will save some costs in a way that the auditors usually have on the kind of the travel expenses, but it will also, on the other hand, will generate other issues and other associated costs in the purchasing the equipment, and also the topics that we're talking about with the challenges and barriers of implementing the technology. So it is kind of similar with what we just covered in the previous session, that there are issues with training and with purchasing the equipment and also the data quality. So I mean, I think the COVID-19 pandemic will absolutely change some of the processes or the concepts that we used to have on the audit profession and on the accounting profession. And I think there will be some positive impacts. Maybe people are more open to getting used to remote teaching or remote education and even remote audit. But also we need to be more equipped with dealing with the issues that are very much similar to what we are currently facing now with the implementation of technology and modern data analytics skills.
That's great, Winru. And Hilal, do you think the health sector will be changing after COVID-19 in terms of how they use analytics in the financial data got?
Yes, definitely. I think it's already changing because for the pandemic analysis, a lot of data analytics and machine learning tools already have been used. So definitely healthcare sector is one of the sectors that is vastly affected by the pandemic. But also overall, I think the virtual work that became the new normal with the pandemic will change the nature of the work of auditors and accountants in general, not only in healthcare, but I think in the other sectors as well, because that can increase acceptance of technology as people are getting more used to remote work and work in different locations using different technologies. And I think this combined with the innovations in education that Miklos and you, Amir, mentioned, there will be changes in the nature of skill acquisition and work, and and this will reflect, I think, in the auditing as well.
Thank you, Ella. And finally, Miklos, what do you think the future will look like in terms of data analytics from whether from research, education, or regulatory point of view?
Yeah, I think it will be kind of a continuous assurance. It's not going to be really what we think as audit today. It's going to be more like a data quality kind of thing on a continuous basis. And the objective is not going to be to come like the general that comes in after the war and shoots the wounded, but it's going to be more predictive and avoiding bad data or incorrect data to flow downstream, and will be adjustive, basically AI-ish type of thing that will keep adjusting. You do process mining, find a control weakness, rapidly plug the hole, or the override of controls, examine the override of controls. And the other thing that is maybe really changing things is there will be some data that won't be sitting in your servers. Will be sitting in a common blockchain that will be not your data, not someone else's data, will be common data. And that's a very different view of data.
That's great, Miklos. And I think for those who've seen the new report for FRC, one of the areas I'd like to look at is to separate the audit profession a little bit and have different qualification for them rather than just accounting. So in American terms, being a CPA is not going to be enough to be an auditor. You need to do something on top of that to be an auditor, and that's the direction in the UK at the moment. There are many questions who can handle that, whether we have a profession, a new profession for auditing or not. That's lots of questions being raised, and that's what the consultation is looking for. So finally, I'd like to thank very much the panelists today, Miklos Vessarelli, Hilal Atsoy, and Wenu Hung. And I'd like as well to ask any one of you guys, if you'd like to interested to know more about the work we do, whether in the CAR Lab or in DRAAN in Durham, please get in touch with myself or any of the speakers. We can put you in the mailing list, so we can include you in all the events and all the activities. We're having monthly events every month. We have lots of activities. We're having a monthly bulletin, give you a brief about all the call of papers, all the activities, webinars, workshops we do to keep you updated with our activities. And we're happy to be have any one of you would like to be engaged with the process. There are lots of free courses offered by the CAR Lab. They're free, all the webinars are free. There is a very rich digital library, whether in CAR Lab or in DRAAN. You can tag into them and use them. We're happy for you as well to use the digital library for your teaching or anything. We don't charge anything for that. So I'd like again thank all the panelists today, and thank you guys. And I'd like to thank everyone and Beth as well, organizers, for organizing this very insightful session. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and I look forward to hearing from any of you who are interested to know more about our work. So thank you very much, Miklos, Hilal, and Wenru, and thank for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amir.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amir, for the organization.
Thank you.